There will be no spoilers in this video. Ravagers sees the return of Christopher Eccleston in his role as the Ninth Doctor for the first time in nearly 16 years. Ravagers follows one continuous story which carries across its 3 individual episodes with a wholly new story, villain, and companion. The only character in this one that you'll be familiar with is the Doctor, and that leads us to the big question. Is it any good? Well, yes, it's pretty good. Sphere of Freedom is your introduction to the box set, and it's a fun and enjoyable story which doesn't outstay its welcome, and just offers a fair amount of fun and interest. It provides a different style to what you've seen before with the Ninth Doctor in the RTD era, while also playing it fairly safe and not feeling particularly innovative. Which is part of why I only called this thing pretty good, because at the end of the day, I don't think it ever really manages to stand out in any of the elements it presents. The reason Ravagers will be talked about as much as it is has to do with the return of Christopher Eccleston as this character. If these were just some 8th Doctor audios, you probably wouldn't hear that much about them. Now, having said that, I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't have a fun time and enjoy the man's return to the character. It's just kind of delightful to be able to hear him portray the Ninth Doctor for the first time since Series 1. He definitely doesn't feel exactly the same as his portrayal on TV, which is to be expected given the 16-year gap, the format, and the time period in which this thing is set. It's not going to be exactly the same as what you've seen before, which is absolutely fine, especially since the performance he brings is just a lot of fun, and he seems to so effortlessly command the screen and have such a great presence within this thing. There are moments that don't totally land for me, and I think this is down to the writing. There's moments that just don't fully work, which do tend to be the jokes. Not all of them are like that, but when they don't land, you do feel that, and it takes you out of the experience for a little bit, at least for me. But that's small in the grand scheme of things, and I'd say that somewhere around 90% of the time, Eccleston's performance and the writing mesh very well together, but it is worth noting that it's not all of the time. And coming back to the moments that do keep this thing back a little bit, the story never feels like it's groundbreaking, but it did genuinely engage me while I was listening to it. Not the most memorable thing, but some interesting ideas are being played with, especially towards the middle of the box set. Additionally, a new companion is introduced in here which I quite enjoyed. Her name is Nova, and though she's not incredible by any means, she is what you want in this kind of a character, which is to say, fun, charismatic, and an overall good addition to the piece. She feels like she has a genuine personality to her, which helps her to stand out just a little bit and not be any other stock companion. At the end of the day, I won't remember her all that well, but I think she works effectively in here. So the first part worked for me, but it definitely wasn't as good as I necessarily wanted it to be. Cataclysm continues Ravagers rather effectively, and proved to be my favorite part from the box set, though comparable in quality to the one which came before it. I think the main reason that this one had me just that little bit more engaged than the previous was down to the villain. As said, the villain is wholly original, and it is around this point where you do get to learn more about them and they get some quality back and forth with the Doctor. It's one of the cases where the performance is strong, the dynamic works well, the writing is effective enough to the point where it does work as an engaging balance for this foe and our hero, but also not the most memorable one. I mean, I won't be naming them as my favorite villain or anything, but I found their presence effective and I liked what we got here. The actual story is about as engaging as with Sphere of Freedom, but I think by this point in the box set I was just more invested in the whole experience, so everything that it was going for just connected that little bit more. Had the first part been particularly bland or dull, then this one probably would have struggled, and that is because they are so linked together. They really don't feel all that much like separate stories, even though they are listed as such. So throughout the whole of these first 2 parts, I think that a good job was done at making all the elements be pretty fun and enjoyable to listen to throughout, even though, at the end of the day, there's nothing spectacular in here. If I had to compare this to Series 1, which is the only other Ninth Doctor content we have, with Christopher Eccleston at least, it definitely isn't as strong as that, in my opinion. The only stories from that season that are on par or possibly worse than the first 2 in here are Aliens of London / World War III and The Long Game. If Sphere of Freedom and Cataclysm were actually in Series 1, and I was ranking the episodes, they would be low on the ranking. Which is not to say they are bad, I just don't find as much to like here as what we've seen before with this Doctor. Food Fight is where this changes from pretty good to fine. There are nice moments in here, but I personally was not all that engaged by the way that they tried to continue this story, though I do admire its ambition to a degree. Again, no spoilers, but this one is the longest of the three and also the one with the most going on. And I think that the amount this one tries to do, and the way it tries to really serve as a big way to end this box set, where you go to these different places and the Doctor learns about these specific pieces of information, it just tries to make everything feel big, which unfortunately didn't work for me. It's not to say it can't be done, but personally, I wasn't invested enough in what was going on to be able to care as much about this as it feels the story wants me to. And really, that's not to say that trying to be big is a bad thing, but I think that when you try to do as much as this one does, when honestly it probably could have been told more simply, some of what you might have on the page just doesn't fully translate the way that perhaps they wanted it to. At least as far as I can tell from what was left in the audio. Again, I'm being vague to avoid spoilers, but I just don't think that this one was ever able to hook the audience the way that it tries to, and because of that, it goes on this ride trying to show you everything that it wants to and tell you everything and explain it in a slightly complicated way, but if it can't hook you, then a lot of the story is going to fall flat, which is what happened with me. It wasn't all bad. There were moments that I really found myself enjoying, but because of not only the lack of actually getting hooked by what Food Fight is trying to do, and because it takes even longer to do something that I wasn't really into, I did find myself bored in places. I don't want to say that, but it's true. The end to this box set just didn't fully do it for me. It's not awful by any means, but it is slightly complicated, unengaging, and overly long in a way that just didn't connect with me. I hope that makes sense, because I am trying to be semi-articulate without giving away plot details, which can be quite challenging. The individual things that it tries to do aren't necessarily bad ideas, I just think the way they're executed failed to land. Overall, I found Ravagers to be an enjoyable, if ultimately inconsequential adventure. Christopher Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor is why people are looking forward to this one, and with good reason, because for the most part, he really works in the part. For me, it's the surrounding material that leaves you with something to be desired. It all works just well enough to be fun and entertaining, particularly the villain towards the middle of the story and their dynamic with the Doctor, but ultimately is not able to carry that steam into the final part, where I just was not as engaged with the material. It's an enjoyable debut for Eccleston in Big Finish, if a tad disappointing when considering A, the quality of his Series 1 stories, and B, the almost 16-year wait for his return. I look forward to seeing what we get with him in the future and hope they try more different, unique, and fun things, but in terms of this release, it's a fun and harmless Big Finish box set, particularly for Ninth Doctor fans, and I'm going to give Ravagers a rating of 7 out of 10. I may have come across somewhat negative in this video, but do keep in mind that overall I've given this release a positive grade and enjoyed what we got here. I think it's comparable in quality to the 10th Doctor Adventures Volume 2, which I thought was unfortunately the weakest of the 3 Tennant box sets that I have listened to, though I'm not 100% sure which I actually preferred. But at the end of the day, if you can afford it and are interested in the release, check it out, and hopefully you'll like it at least as much or more than me. I hope to see you around soon for more Doctor Who videos, including a top 10 list of my favorite Pertwee stories to round off his era of Doctor Who, before we kick things off with Robot. So I hope you join me for one or both of those videos, but if not, that is totally fine, so long as you know that I appreciate your time here today. And with that said, thank you very much for watching, take care, and have a lovely week.
Hello. I'm the Doctor.
Hey, what's going on around here?